afternoon. It is Tuesday, August 19th. I'm Yumna Naufal. These are today's headlines. The Education Parliamentary Committee says it will recommend that Lebanese University impose entrance exams for all its faculties, while stressing the decision to issue passing certificates is final. Israel and Palestinian leaders agree to extend the Gaza truce by another 24 hours, minutes before the Egyptian brokered ceasefire was set to expire. And Iraqi government troops and allied militiamen launch a major operation to retake the city of Tikrit from Islamist militants. The Education Parliamentary Committee says it will recommend that the Lebanese University impose entrance exams for all its faculties, while stressing that the decision to issue passing certificates is final regardless of the UCC's decision. According to the committee's recommendation, any student with a passing certificate who wishes to enter LU for the next academic year will have to sit on an entrance exam. Only a few of LU's faculties have been asking incoming students to take entrance tests in previous years. However, the education minister's decision to give passing certificates to all of grade 12 students means that even those who would have failed the official exams have automatically passed. USAB's decision means that many of the applicants to universities would not normally have been eligible, making it necessary to filter the numbers, especially for the Lebanese University. The interrogation of suspected ISIS commander Imad Jum'a, who is being held on terror-related charges, has been postponed, according to a judicial source. The source said military investigative judge Imad Zain did not set a new date for the next session. He postponed Tuesday's session after Jum'a's lawyer, Tariq Sandab, filed a motion in the Beirut military court saying that confessions by Jum'a and 42 other suspects charged with belonging to terrorist groups, killing Lebanese soldiers and capturing others, were made under duress. Jum'a's arrest earlier this month sparked 5 days of gun battles between Syrian militants and the Lebanese army in the Bekaa Valley border town of Arsil. Israel and Palestinian leaders have agreed to extend a Gaza truce by another 24 hours, minutes before an Egyptian brokered ceasefire was set to expire. The agreement was reached as gaps on key issues continue to dog efforts to achieve a long-term deal between Israel and the armed groups in the Gaza Strip, dominated by Hamas, which would allow reconstruction aid to flow in after 5 weeks of fighting. The month-long war ended more than a week ago when Egypt secured a 3-day truce, extended by another 5 days that expired on Monday. A Palestinian official close to the talks in Cairo said the latest extension would give both sides time to complete the negotiations. Human Rights Watch is urging authorities in Iran to release immediately and unconditionally dozens of prisoners jailed in a northern city for exercising what they are calling their basic rights. In a lengthy report, the New York-based body studied the cases of 189 people locked up in Karaj, about 50 kilometers west of the capital, Tehran. HRW said that in 63 cases, prisoners had been arrested, convicted, and sentenced solely because they exercised fundamental rights such as free speech and rights to peaceful assembly or association. In the United States, police say 2 people were shot and wounded and 31 arrested in the latest night of unrest in the Missouri town of Ferguson, rocked by a racially charged killing. The wounded were hit by gunfire from demonstrators in the Midwestern town, as police did not open fire, according to Captain Ron Johnson of the Missouri Highway Patrol. 4 police were injured by thrown objects, as some of the protesters in the crowd of about 200 came as far away as New York and California. He said police fired tear gas as a last resort to disperse the crowd in this mainly black town with a mainly white police force. The condition of the 2 people wounded by gunfire is yet to be known. Coming up next, more than 6,000 new fighters join the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. This is the largest group yet. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching the 4:20 o'clock news. Iraqi government troops and allied militiamen launched a major operation to retake the city of Tikrit from Sunni militants. The Iraqi army and volunteers, backed by Iraqi helicopters, are taking part in the operation to retake the hometown of executed former President Saddam Hussein, according to a high-ranking army officer. He said the military push started early in the morning from the south and southwest of the city, which lies around 160 kilometers north of the capital, Baghdad. The operation comes as jihadists are busy on other fronts further north, where resurgent Kurdish Peshmerga forces, buoyed by Western arms deliveries and U.S. airstrikes, have gone on the offensive. This comes as Kurdish and Iraqi government forces have taken control of the Mosul dam from the Islamic State group after days of fighting aided by multiple airstrikes from U.S. jets and drones. U.S. President Barack Obama is praising Iraqi and Kurdish security forces for retaking the dam in Mosul, and he is vowing to continue military and humanitarian support.
With respect to Iraq, we continue to see important progress across different parts of our strategy to support the Iraqi government and combat the threat from the terrorist group ISIL. First, our military operations are effectively protecting our personnel and facilities in Iraq. Over the last 11 days, American airstrikes have stopped the ISIL advance around the city of Erbil and pushed back the terrorists. Meanwhile, we have urgently provided additional arms and assistance to Iraqi forces, including Kurdish and Iraqi security forces who are fighting on the front lines. Today, with our support, Iraqi and Kurdish forces took a major step forward by recapturing the largest dam in Iraq near the city of Mosul. I told my national security team today, and I will say publicly, that we want to continue to communicate to politicians of all stripes in Iraq. Don't think that because we have engaged in airstrikes to protect our people, that now's the time to let the foot off the gas and return to the same kind of dysfunction that has so weakened the country generally. We see a credible Iraqi government. We are then in a position to engage with planning, not just with the Iraqi government, but also with regional actors and folks beyond the Middle East, so that we can craft the kind of joint strategy, joint counterterrorism strategy that I discussed at West Point.
Live from Boston, Massachusetts in the United States is terrorist expert Max Abrams with us on the line. How are you, Max?
Good. Happy to be with you.
Okay, thank you for being with us. Max, as President Obama just said, well, the Islamic State is saying it will retaliate against the United States. He is saying he is vowing to continue in helping the people on the ground in Iraq in order to retake the parts that have been taken over by ISIS. And in an online video, they have threatened to retaliate against the United States. So what do you think?
Well, I think the most significant aspect of Obama's speech last night is that this is basically an open-ended commitment. There's no, finish line for when the United States will stop its involvement. Indeed, it looks really just the opposite, that the United States is increasing its involvement by using attacks from the sky, as well as providing weapons to the Kurds. And it appears that this 1-2 punch, really, of U.S. support, U.S. military support, as well as Kurdish/Iraqi security forces fighting, is in fact an effective reply to ISIS.
Right. It's an effective reply to ISIS in Iraq right now. But ISIS, as we've seen in the last couple of weeks, it's making headlines all over the world. UK Prime Minister David Cameron a few days ago was saying that if it is not contained, it could get to, it's getting to the English borders. People are talking about it in Lebanon, in Syria. They're all over the place.
Sure.
So, and I just got news today from the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. They just came out with a report that said that over 1,000 of the new recruits in Syria are foreign and the rest Syrian, and they're all joining ISIS. So what does this mean for the region?
Well, it's scary because, militant groups use violence to a large extent as a communications strategy to say, look how strong we are. Look how militarily capable we are. And so because ISIS has been so successful at killing so many people, it indicates that it's a strong group, and therefore other groups are joining up with ISIS, making it a bigger and bigger threat. From the West perspective, particularly the United States perspective, The big question these days, of course, is whether ISIS is mainly a regional threat. ISIS is obviously a huge threat in Iraq and Syria, probably Jordan, maybe even Lebanon, maybe even Israel. But does it have the same international aims as, say, Al-Qaeda? And I think that more and more there is a sense that ISIS does have those international aims, in part because it's comprised of so many Westerners who have passports which would enable them to return to Europe or return to the United States, plus the fact that their rhetoric is becoming more and more anti-America, particularly since August 8th, when the United States began military operations against the group.
Okay, right. So you're saying, right, so it's very similar to Al-Qaeda. It has an anti-American, it has an a lot of things kind of rhetoric, as you were saying. But my question is, now they're talking about containing it, as you were saying. It's a Middle Eastern threat for sure, but it is also becoming a global threat. And how do you combat such a group? Because, as you said, it's not just Arab people. There are nationals from all over the world that are going to combat on Middle Eastern ground and eventually do come back to their countries. So is there a solution?
Well, counterinsurgency from the standpoint of government forces is always extremely difficult. But it's particularly difficult when counterinsurgency is waged remotely, say from Washington, D.C. And I don't think that anybody has any illusions that the United States can, completely take out ISIS. And that's why you'll notice that Obama's language is much more modest than his predecessors. Whereas his predecessor, Bush, talked about defeating all terrorists, winning the war on terrorism. Obama is talking more about containment. And to a large extent, that's a function not just of the lessons learned in Iraq since 2003, as well as in Afghanistan, but it also has to do with the American public's view in terms of how much it wants to invest in a military campaign in the Muslim world. And I think that the United States is much more isolationist today than it was in 2003. And although there's widespread support for what Obama is trying to do, the nature of that support is rather shallow. And I think that Obama really cannot dramatically escalate attacks against ISIS because the American public won't stand for it.
I just want to end very quickly, in less than a minute, if you can answer me this. You're a terrorist expert. How does ISIS compare to other terrorist groups?
There has never been a terrorist group like ISIS before in the world. This is the richest group in terms of its money. It robs banks, it kidnaps, it sells oil. This is the strongest group probably in terms of its weaponry. Furthermore, this is a self-reliant group that doesn't depend on donations. It operates more like a proto-state. So in that sense, its capabilities are much, much bigger. That said, we haven't seen ISIS commit a mass casualty attack like a 9/11, and so the level of its skills in terms of its sophistication with bomb-making equipment may not be quite at the same level as Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which is really known for that.
Well, it's a lot of atrocities in the news here in the Middle East, not 9/11, but like you said, yet, so this is a story to be continued. And thank you so much for being with us today. That was Max Abrams, live from Boston, Massachusetts, our terrorist expert. And on that note, I will remind you of our top stories. The Education Parliamentary Committee recommends the Lebanese University impose entrance exams for all faculties while stressing the decision to issue passing certificates is final. Israel and Palestinian leaders agree to extend the Gaza truce by another 24 hours, minutes before an Egyptian brokered ceasefire is set to expire. Iraqi government troops and allied militiamen launch a major operation to retake the city of Tikrit from Islamist jihadists. Those are your Tuesday headlines live on Future Television in Beirut. I'm Yumna Naufal, wishing you a good night.